Welcome everyone to the premiere of the new show. I am Anastasia Fedorin, and today with us is YUNUS, an American political scientist, an expert in international affairs, and also a former chief of staff of the Azerbaijani government. Hello, Mr. YUNUS.
Greetings to you. Thank you for the invitation. It's been a long time since we've seen each other, dear Anastasia. I greet our esteemed audience. Glory to Ukraine.
Glory to the heroes. I know that you are currently in Baku. You had an international conference there. Also, you are surely discussing all the issues that we will also talk about today. But with your permission, I will start with what is happening in the USA, because who, if not you, knows more about what is being said there about Ukraine, and of course, in the context of the entire world order. We are, of course, observing how negotiations are constantly taking place, whether closed or open. But just recently, we saw a visit of the US President's special envoy, Vitkov, who, it turns out, raised a lot of questions in the USA. It has come to the point, as Reuters reports, that Republicans are even considering removing him from his position. They say he is violating standard security procedures, for example, when he invited the envoy of the Kremlin head, Kirill Dmitriev, who is under US sanctions, to his private residence. Meanwhile, Lavrov, after Vitkov's visit, is giving him many compliments, while American President Trump today admitted that Ukraine's pursuit of NATO was a mistake. Mr. YUNUS, what is happening? How should we understand this? Surely political game today? And could there be some hidden context behind it?
First of all, when you say, who can know better than me? Everyone knows better than me. Allah. Therefore, I am just a mortal. I can only rely on my experience. As a political analyst and living in the USA, and the information and sometimes intuition that also helps in certain moments. Now, regarding this international conference, yes, you are right. Representatives from think tanks of 44 countries gathered at this international conference. This conference was held in Baku and in Hankenli, which was recently liberated, where the legal framework of Azerbaijan was restored. And indeed, all geopolitical processes in the world were discussed. And of course, the Russian-Ukrainian war stood out, and all that you are asking me about now. Now, moving directly to answering your question, this is not the first meeting between Donald Trump's special representative and the Russian leadership, and it is the third meeting. Just like the previous two, we see a massive information attack in the media, and that, if we analyze and recall those previous two meetings, we understand that 90% of it is lies. Nothing corresponds to reality. I mean, when either beforehand or immediately the next day they start talking about it, because no one in principle really knows what it's about. And only after a few days, when the heads of state themselves come out and speak on the topic, and we understand that today, despite the third meeting, the process is going very hard. Not as Donald Trump and his team expected, and not as Russia expected as well. Therefore, if it aligned with the interests of both Russia and Ukraine, and Russia and the United States of America, then surely we would see a different tone. And therefore, when now they try to cast a shadow and those who oppose mainly escalate, it's Reuters who is one of the leaders in this topic, because they, so to speak, do not like Donald Trump and his team, that is, representatives of the left liberal, so to speak, mass media. And this is quite natural. We must understand that those who support Trump will praise him, and those who oppose Trump will criticize him, and both sides lie. The truth is, no one knows, because it's classified information. The only thing that might be true, we can see after we hear the direct statement that will be made by Donald Trump. Because after two negotiations, we saw that he is not very satisfied, but his dissatisfaction so far goes no further. The rhetoric is not moving anywhere. That is to say, the promises to take very tough actions against Russia will remain just promises for now. And let's wait a few days to know for sure what they might have agreed upon. If you ask my opinion, I think the process has stalled, So far, there are no specific achievements, yes, for the simple reason that they cannot be, because the interests of the parties are diametrically opposed. Pressure on Ukraine is not working, primarily because there is a completely different president in Ukraine than those who were before him. And the situation in the Oval Office is clear evidence of this. And the ability to work with Europeans and the fact that the Europeans are also narrowing, the circle of those willing, is appearing more or less. Some principled individuals who, in principle, are ready to align within certain parameters for the same Ukraine. And we do not see a weakening of positions in Europe's support regarding Ukraine. And based on this, you understand that Ukraine will stand firm, Russia will stand firm. In this situation, Donald Trump must make a decision, either to pressure Ukraine or to pressure Russia. He cannot pressure Ukraine because Ukraine is moving forward with agreements, meaning there is no subject of conflict. And I think that now, while the negotiations on rare earth metals are not yet concluded, similarly, this is indicative. I think that Donald Trump is already quietly winding down the rhetoric. He will have to choose the lesser of two evils, and he will have to make some decision. If you think that some cardinal decision has been made there or something, I don't think so. Yes, they will, of course, restore political relations, embassies, and much more. But if we are talking specifically about the Russian-Ukrainian war, I don't see any light there yet, at the end of the tunnel. And the more difficult the negotiations will be between Russia and Ukraine, Russia and the United States of America, the better it is for Ukraine. This provides a maneuvering option for Ukraine to strengthen their contacts with the Europeans. Unfortunately, among the Europeans today, there are very few countries that can actually take any actions. I'm observing this, and I think that the United Kingdom, Turkey, the Scandinavian countries, the Baltic states, and Poland should stand apart. And all the representatives of old Europe, they are more about money. They are not capable of anything else, because to really engage in this topic, we see that they lack a strong desire as such, because they, throughout all these years of their existence after World War II, they have been very much tied to the United States of America. They are somewhat afraid of America. They need concreteness, and America is not showing any concreteness yet. No one can understand what Donald Trump is capable of, because with his rhetoric today, he has cornered not only himself in this topic, and his recent actions regarding these tariffs are clear evidence of this. That is, he attacks, then sees that it leads to a market crash, and this affects the securities of the US national debt, and he has to damage his own image and take a step back. And that's why many people start to take him quite unseriously. If he is not taken seriously in this topic, it means he might not be taken seriously in the Russian-Ukrainian topic either by those involved in these negotiations. He might not be taken seriously in the Middle East either, where the same Steve Utkov is active. As you know, after meeting with Vladimir Putin, he flew to Oman, where he met with Iran, among others. And similarly, negotiations were held behind closed doors there, and it seems they concluded. And in the same tone as after the meeting in St. Petersburg, they speak positively. That is, on one hand, Trump is not interested in confrontation. He wants to appear as a peacemaker. And on the other hand, he fails to be a peacemaker anywhere. And this phrase, peace through strength, which he declared, well, it is kind of failing, because there is no peace. You are not demonstrating strength. So he remains in the middle, like in this split between peace and strength. To avoid getting into trouble, he needs to choose a side and take concrete actions. I think the time spent on rhetoric is coming to an end soon. He needs to do something.
Yes, that's interesting. Regarding the sanctions of the world's countries, Trump threatened that if Russia does not agree to negotiations, he might strengthen them. We know that when it comes to those specific sanctions, Trump, which was still in place under President Biden, saw that it is indeed about a number of restrictions that were introduced back in 2021. Later, the decree was supplemented and extended in 2022, 2023. But there are different nuances there. These are not all the sanctions for the invasion of Ukraine, but as for the sanctions for the war, when there will be additional ones, it is indeed interesting, especially since Trump is often said to aim for a truce by April 20th. So within 100 days, the Trump team would certainly like to do something in this direction. But so far, it seems that there is no indication that something will be announced about soon or that any results can be achieved. What is the main problem today? What's next? Time is running out. If we speak in the context of these 100 days.
In the context of these 100 days? No, let's not get tied to these 100 days right now, because this war, it cannot be resolved by the wish of some person who said, I'll resolve it in 24 days, in a week, or by some deadline that he sets. He determines this for himself. Just because he determines it for himself, it doesn't mean the opposing side will follow it. For example, he set these tariffs and imposed them. He has to change himself as well. Why? Because the other side disagrees and shows its resources, its capabilities. Do you really think that in this war, by making such statements against Russia and against Ukraine, he hoped that it would actually happen? He has a lot from show business, where he came from, and therefore he pays great attention to the informational component. This works well with the election campaign. This helped him come to power, because as you see, 80 million believed, and he became the president of the United States of America. But having become the president of the United States of America, you now have to do something. And for these 80 million here within the country, and if you say something about foreign policy, then you also have to transition there from words to action. There is a certain time for rhetoric, which is what he was doing. Therefore, in answering the first question, I told you that the time allotted for rhetoric has ended. He needs to make some decisions. When we talk about sanctions, we must understand that the sanctions imposed by the West and the United States of America, they do not produce the specific effect that is needed. Just look at Iran, for example, because if we talk about the sanctions of the Western world, besides the Western world, there is another world, often referred to as the Global South, led by China. China, India, Brazil, and a large number of other countries that continue to trade freely with Russia. And there, the Americans, of course, are making efforts, like secondary sanctions in the banking sector regarding the shadow fleet and many others. But this also will not produce the effect needed to truly collapse, the economy of Russia, because today, the countries that will oppose and support Russia, they are much stronger than Russia itself, primarily China and India. And without solving the issues with China, how do you proceed further? It's just beginning this trade war. The trade war will also lead to some kind of deal between the United States of America and China. This is, again, just rhetoric that claims a more substantial path here. This is the path, as he also mentioned in the election campaign. If Russia disagrees, I will supply weapons to Ukraine. Well, and if he starts doing this, then he understands that everyone will start. They tell him, so you were initially wrong when you were told that Vladimir Putin, Russia, they would never agree to this. Because if it were, for example, 2008, when Putin came to Munich in 2007, said something and then started in 2008, and you didn't punish him then, you went to negotiate with him, you were seeking a reset. Don't you understand that appeasement with this type of politicians, with this type of countries with imperial ambitions, leads to nothing? We have seen this many times in history, even in recent history. The story with Hitler is a clear example of this. The year 2008 is a clear example of this, because after 2008 came 2014, and you continued to appease him. Even on February 24th, when it started 3 years ago, you also began to appease it. And again today, stepping on the same rake and saying, let's meet again, let's talk again. Do you not understand what Russia's interest is? Russia's interest is to restore its hegemony over all these post-Soviet geographies. And if there is an opportunity to go a little further, as the president of Russia said in 2007 to 1997, that is to say, not understanding this, it simply means not understanding big politics. It's one thing, are you against it or for it? If you are against it, then you need to show strength against strength. And when they talk about peace through strength, so far it only speaks of peace. He is not demonstrating strength yet. Yes, from everything that exists today, I was asked, and at this conference, we talked with many specialists from different countries, and we all agree that it is easiest for him to achieve some kind of success for his image. This is the topic of Iran and not the topic of the Middle East or the Russian-Ukrainian one, because he will not be able to achieve success in either the Russian-Ukrainian or the Middle Eastern topics very easily. But on the Iranian topic, he can. Again, there cannot be a full-scale war there because he does not need it either. But some precise bombing with such heavy bombs, he can afford to target the nuclear programs of Iran, for example, because it won't escalate out of control. But on the other hand, everyone will see that Trump doesn't make empty promises. That is, he has now set a specific deadline for these negotiations in Oman. If these negotiations, as I understand, are not just one meeting, several more meetings are needed. Yes, between Foreign Minister Aragchi and Steve Utko, because this was a preliminary sort of first meeting, and it seemed to have a positive outcome. And this indicates that neither side wants this. Iran also does not want this. Iran does not want these nuclear sites to be bombed. Iran also wants to make a deal, just a different kind of deal. The essence of the Iranian regime is such that Iran, which wants to make this deal, but first it wants to receive a guarantee that the regime, there will not be overthrown. And for the regime not to be overthrown, it means it must be an external adversary. Even if the Americans start bombing, it is actually beneficial for the Iranians. From the perspective that we are resisting, and it's the Americans who are bombing. Remember the recent history with the assassination of General Soleimani? It didn't escalate beyond control. Iran sent 300 to 350 missiles there, and the issue was closed at that point. I think the bombing of nuclear facilities will also have a similar nature. That is, it will not escalate beyond control. But as a result, the consolidation of Iranian society will occur, meaning the regime in Iran will not be overthrown, because when there is an external enemy, it's always the law of the genre. And on the other hand, Donald Trump will save face, meaning he moved from words to action. He did not allow Iran to have a nuclear program. Simply put, Iran is the weak link here. Iran is not Russia. And the issue of Iran is not a Middle Eastern topic where for over 70 years, this issue has not been resolved. Therefore, this might happen here to at least slightly to support Donald Trump's reputation. But in the Russian-Ukrainian context, this is impossible unless you show strength there. Therefore, I think in Donald Trump's circle, all these advisors, all those involved, they understand this and need to adopt some form of strength. From my point of view, the strongest side is not sanctions. The strongest side is precisely to support in the military technical aspect Ukraine, perhaps not even with their own hands. It can be done through the hands of those same Europeans who are afraid. That is, if you support the Europeans, meaning to say, go ahead, I permit it, I stand behind you. In other words, then the Europeans will be more decisive on this issue. Well, there is also the option of a collapse in oil prices. That's the only thing that will be significant from the Americans. Pressure on Russia, a collapse in oil prices, and strengthening military technical support for Ukraine, then yes. Then in this context, this is the strength that can help Donald Trump in implementation. I simply don't see any other options for the theme of peace, because Russia, which does not feel military pressure from the United States of America, will never take a step back.
But there's another important topic that we have always discussed with you. We look at the individual, the wife, Azerbaijan, and everything that is happening with Armenia. It is known that the foreign ministers held talks in Turkey. The BBC is releasing a major report stating that Armenia and Azerbaijan have agreed on the final text of the peace treaty, but peace is still far off. There are disagreements on various issues, and today they could not be resolved. What is really happening? Why, indeed, has the peace treaty not been signed yet? This is surely a confirmation of your thesis that even in the context of Ukraine and Russia, you indeed say that there are no 100 days here. It's hardly possible to look at any real deadlines. What experience can we draw from today? And of course, from your side and what is happening today, is it true that peace is still far off?
Thank you for this question. And for this phrase, what experience can Ukraine take? Because, in fact, even in the corridors of this conference, there is a lot. They talked about this topic. And I remember last year when I participated in the media forum in Shuk, and now when we again communicated with the president of Azerbaijan, and then he spoke, and today he spoke, so everyone, all these political analysts, all these representatives of think tanks, each from different regions. One was interested in European topics, Chinese topics, Middle Eastern, Iran, Russian, Ukrainian. So all these geopolitical processes. And it is very important, of course, from the mouth of a politician of such a high level who has been in big politics for many years. He is a well-informed person to know the position on all these key points of the president of Azerbaijan. And he clearly expressed himself on all these issues. And about the Russian-Ukrainian war, he openly said that I cannot imagine. He even said, either I don't understand big politics or Ukraine will never agree to recognize the territories occupied by Russia. That's definite. Azerbaijan did not agree to this either. And from his words, it also follows there's no need to reinvent the wheel. Look at Azerbaijan, study the experience of Azerbaijan. This concerns you directly, dear Ukrainians, because in such matters, relying on a political settlement of this type of conflicts is impossible. The president of Azerbaijan said that in this situation, a temporary truce is possible. We had the Bishkek Protocol in 1994, 26 years ago. A truce is possible, but peace between Russia and Ukraine, just like peace between Azerbaijan and Armenia, is impossible until one side capitulates. There are no other options. In our case, Armenia capitulated. But again, Armenia, when this happened in 2020, it capitulated. But it was counting on the fact that these 5% of the territory, which ended up under the boot of the so-called Russian peacekeepers, they could use as a foothold to once again revive this issue of separatism. But Azerbaijan fundamentally destroyed these beginnings and did not even allow these Russian peacekeepers to stay there for 5 years, as was agreed. Within 3 years, they left the territory of Karabakh. I have been saying this from day one of this conflict and regularly on your channels. It's just a tragedy. Armenian politicians did not understand this. They were counting on America. They were counting on the Europeans. Just like you, unfortunately, were counting on. You see what such support, such a one-sided pro-Western policy leads to. It led to a fiasco in Georgia. It led to a fiasco in Moldova. It led to a fiasco in Ukraine. It led to a fiasco 30 years ago in my native Azerbaijan after the First Karabakh War. Therefore, conclusions must be drawn from all this. Here we are, for example, dear Ukrainians, the reason I keep saying this and sharing my personal example is my experience between the First and Second Karabakh Wars. I am one of those politicians who was in the government and believed in pro-European integration, Azerbaijan's accession to NATO. I advocated for this in the same way. Today, I fully understand the error of this policy. You even incorporated it into your constitution. This was also a mistaken policy because it would have been correct if someone had stood up for you at that moment, stepped in, and now you see it in the United States of America as well. This left liberal policy has failed. If it has failed in the very West, in the very center of this left liberal policy, under the name of the United States of America, over these 35 years, they have migrated it from there to Europe. In Europe, they held all the political positions, and then we delegated this to the post-Soviet space after 1991. And after the collapse of the Soviet Union, we all rushed there. We all believed in it. Democracy, freedom of speech, human rights, sovereignty, territorial integrity. It sounds beautiful, but you have to fight for it. And we went to the front lines. Blood was shed across the entire post-Soviet space along the perimeter of the Russian border. in Karabakh, in Abkhazia, in the Chkin Valley region, in Transnistria. And then 2008, a full-scale 5-day war in Georgia. Then 2014, the year for you. And what has been happening to you over these more than 10 years? All of this happened after we went to the front lines. Under these false slogans, left liberal ones, that came to us from the West. Why do I call them false? Because they sound nice in words, but they turned out to be false because they themselves did not stand up for them. They delegated these slogans to us, but did not stand by them. They made a deal behind our backs with the same Kremlin. At one time, they did this with Yeltsin starting from 1992. Bill Clinton initiated it. And now they are doing it with Vladimir Putin's regime. And you can see this throughout all the years of this regime's existence. And only now, when you've hit a wall, they don't know how to proceed further. They are ready even today. To make a deal, you will see Donald Trump's position. You will see the position of many politicians in Europe who are going for it. And why am I saying this? Here, I draw from the experience of Azerbaijan. Notice where we have turned away from this policy. We have drawn conclusions. And today we are not pro-Western, not pro-Chinese, not pro-Russian, not pro-Iranian. We are pro-Azerbaijani. What does this mean? I'll explain it as simply as 2 + 2. We have distanced ourselves from all of them. We are equidistant. We are equidistant. We base our actions on our geography. In this geography, there are 3 countries: Azerbaijan, Georgia, Armenia. Around them, there are 3 more countries: Russia, Iran, Turkey. And based on this geography and considering the greater Middle East, we started looking for real allies. And we have real allies. These are Turkey, a NATO member, the 2nd largest army in NATO; Pakistan, a nuclear power; Israel, the most technologically advanced country in this same region. And these are our strategic partners. Against us are Russia, Iran, the European Union, the United States of America. This was all part of the theme. The Azerbaijan-Armenian war, that is in this theme. And this whole left liberal ideology, we distanced ourselves from them. We found real allies. We prepared for many years and we won. Today, full sovereignty of territorial integrity has been restored. This is acknowledged by Russia, which is at war with you. This is acknowledged by Iran, which helps Russia in fighting against you. This is acknowledged by Europe, toothless Europe, which cannot protect you. This is acknowledged by the United States of America, starting with the pro-Armenian Biden administration, which also cannot protect you. So this is the right policy. And now look at a similar policy from Turkey. Today, everyone acknowledges the position of Turkey and how much dirt there was thrown at Turkey, at its president over the last 20 years from both the USA and European structures, the left liberal ones. And now remember, 3 days ago at the meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu, what Donald Trump said to his close friend Bibi. He says, I called President Erdogan of Turkey yesterday and congratulated him on the fact that he did something in Syria that no politician has managed to do in 2,000 years. Although he says he didn't admit that it was him because he is a very smart politician. And you, Bibi, he says to his friend Netanyahu, you, Bibi, if you behave sensibly, I will help you establish relations with Turkey. That is, today in Israel, the president of Turkey is called all sorts of names beyond being labeled as the main enemy. Yes. While Netanyahu's friend, the main one, yes, Donald Trump praises him. This says a lot about the president of Turkey in this regard. It indicates that the geopolitical situation is changing. And based on this situation, based on this geography, any country should act accordingly. Therefore, Azerbaijan's experience is very important. Look at Georgia, for example. The same left liberal Europe is starting to pressure Georgia today. And why are you pressuring them? Didn't you stand up for them in 2008? Saakashvili is in prison, who, just like Ukraine, was pro-Western. He did everything, including joining NATO, and yet he is in prison. And today you are making demands on the Georgians, right? That they are afraid of Russia and they don't trust you, so where should they go? How can they preserve what is left of Georgia today with Russia present and with the problem in Abkhazia in the Samtskhe-Javaketi region? And that's why Georgia has now entered into a strategic partnership with Turkey and Azerbaijan. And the president of Azerbaijan said at this conference, we will not let Georgia be harmed. Who are we? Azerbaijan and Turkey. And this will be acknowledged by those in Europe, including the left liberal politicians and everyone else. Because if you look at the geography, if you want to come to the South Caucasus, you must take Azerbaijan and Turkey into account. If you want to come to the Middle East, you must consider Turkey and Azerbaijan. If you want to come to Syria, you must consider Turkey. If you want to address the issue with Iran, you must consider Azerbaijan and Turkey. That is the entire geography. Therefore, the experience of Azerbaijan is very important. And for you Ukrainians, your geography is no less important. You are located, so to speak, in the middle between Russia and Europe. You are the largest country in Europe. Today, you have a powerful army. According to my calculations, it is the second army in Europe after the Turkish one. The Turkish army is 1 million strong. Yours is 800,000. Moreover, an army that has gone through the crucible of war. Today, in this geography, there are several armies that are fighting. Let me tell you, this is the Russian army, which regularly fights. This is the Turkish army, which regularly fights. This is the Israeli army, which regularly fights. This is the Azerbaijani army, which has gone through 2 wars. And this is you. I don't see others for now, because neither the German nor the French nor the British can provide this. Because an army is strong, not only in numbers, but when it has combat experience. Therefore, today, understanding this geography, the experience of Azerbaijan is certainly recognized. Do not look for ephemeral allies across the ocean who are not going to stand up for you. Find concrete allies on the ground. Resist. Do not agree to everything that might be offered to you. Do not fear pressure. The main thing is to never legally recognize anything, and prepare for the fact that the only free cheese is in a mousetrap. Donbass and Crimea will never politically return to you. What has left with blood, it can only return with blood. If today this is impossible, then you must prepare for it. The geopolitical situation will change very quickly, because today a new world order is being established. We are in the process, and no one can clearly say what the world order will be. A bipolar world, a multipolar world, under what rules it will exist. We are living right now in this real time. Yes, it is very difficult during the war to do all these maneuvers, but fate has left you no other option. That's why it's precisely during the war that this needs to be done. If there is a truce tomorrow, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, like our Bishkek protocol, the most important thing is that there is no legal formalization, and that there are some security guarantees that while this truce is in place, there cannot be a sudden war as such, so that someone would be a guarantor of this, a guarantor, some real, I think in this situation, the real countries could be nuclear Britain and the strongest army, the Turkish army. If they stand up for Ukraine, at least as security guarantors with 10, 15,000 soldiers, they would be stationed there. If there are a few more countries that will finance this in a military technical sense, also, if the United States supports this as well, I think it will be enough for Russia to step back, and then you will be preparing for how the geopolitical situation will develop further. If the time ever comes, and for you, as the time came for us during the Second Karabakh War, and you have your own Second Karabakh War, then just as we reclaimed Karabakh and the 7 occupied regions, you will be able to reclaim Crimea and the occupied Donbass. That is, you need to prepare for this simply. You need to seriously prepare for this if you consider it your territory. And I have no doubt that the military political leadership of Ukraine and all those who are defending your country with weapons in hand today think the same way. It's just very important that the consolidation of society is 100%. If you don't have this societal consolidation like we have in my native Azerbaijan, you won't be able to reclaim either Crimea or Donbass. Therefore, you need to have some kind of state policy to bring back those 10 million who have left your country. Because neither in HIMARS nor in the F-16, this war is won by specific people who are in charge of this with weapons. That is, these are living people. If the whole society perceives it, while you say in words, this is a patriotic war. But in reality, it should be a war, not of some part of the territory, not of some part of the citizens. It should be a war of the entire nation. Believe me, in Azerbaijan, it was 5 years of consolidation of Azerbaijani society, simply reinforced concrete, and it continues, because what is happening around our region today, yes, it indicates that the war is not over yet. This is how I comprehensively answered your question regarding Azerbaijan, the Armenian topic, because it is not over. 17 points seem to have been signed, and these 17 points appeared after the 5 points that the Azerbaijani president proposed based on the Charter of the United Nations. They increased to 17. And Armenia did not want it, and Armenia did all this, moving towards this peace through force, through the checkpoint on the Lakin Road, through the counterterrorism operation, through the flag of Khan Kendi. We did all this with a carrot and stick approach, a carrot and stick, and we brought it to 17 points. And now out of the last 15, they agreed, and now they agreed to 2 more. And 17 are agreed upon. Now this, for your information, is a roadmap. This is not the peace agreement that many are speculating about today. This is just the foundation, because there are 2 main points left, and one of them is also solvable. It is the dissolution of the OSCE Minsk Group. Because when this conflict began, the OSCE Minsk Group was created in 1992. Russia, France, the United States of America. The war is over. There is no more Karabakh issue. Azerbaijan has liberated Karabakh. Therefore, the Minsk Group should be dissolved, but it has not been dissolved. Why? Because in the United States of America, when France and in Russia, there are certain forces that want to continue speculating on this issue to get involved. Azerbaijan is categorically against this. Azerbaijan is putting pressure on Armenia. We together must appeal to the OSCE organization so that they, based on our joint statement, would dissolve this structure. But this can only happen at the end of this year at the ministerial level. Yet again, this initiative must be taken. This is a solvable issue, but the most significant and key issue. And what in principle started this war in the first place? It remains unresolved to this day, because the declaration of independence in Armenia's constitution after the collapse of the Soviet Union 35 years ago explicitly stated that Nagorno-Karabakh is part of Armenia. They reunited according to their documents. You understand, right? Now, today, Karabakh is liberated, the flag of Azerbaijan, sovereignty, the legal framework, everything has been restored there. But in their current Armenian constitution, in this preamble to the Declaration of Independence, it exists. Azerbaijan says, change the constitution. Because until you change the constitution, agree, dear Ukrainians, you are talking about Azerbaijan's experience. Russia has included in its constitution that these 4 regions are today part of Russia's constitution, right? Would any Russian or Ukrainian politician, whether it's Zelensky, would Zelensky go to sign a peace treaty with Russia when this is not changed in the Russian constitution? Never in life. Never in life. That's why Azerbaijan is not going to agree to this either. Because if Azerbaijan goes to sign some peace treaty, tomorrow there might be a change of power in Armenia. Someone will come and say, you signed this with Nikol Pashinyan, but in our constitution it states this and that. This was a violation of that constitution. That's why Azerbaijan demands a change to that constitution. And until this is changed, there will be no peace between Azerbaijan and Armenia. Even if they change the constitution, only then might the process begin. Reconciliation, and this reconciliation process must go through several generations. It's just like between the Germans and the French, for example, because the war that was between us and Armenia, those 2 wars, it's not the kind of war that ends with the snap of a finger in one day. But in any case, there is movement in this direction. The movement is ongoing, but this movement is ongoing with a carrot and stick approach. Armenia and those who support it, just like that, even though they have capitulated, they also do not want to proceed. Therefore, consider Azerbaijan's experience, be stronger, and know that nothing comes easily. In this life, nothing is done for free. Everything is measured by strength, both in everyday life and especially in politics.